Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is Ms. Sidra Iqbal, visiting teacher of Department of History and Art, Division of Arts and Social Sciences. Here I am with course of Foreign Policy of Pakistan, MA students for the students of MA History with the course code of HIST 411. So students, today we are going to discuss our next topic, which is downfall of Union of Socialist Republics, Soviet Union like USSR. Union of Socialist Republics, Soviet Union. This is also a huge topic which we have to it's must to divide it into 2 or 3 parts. So today we are going to discuss our first part. In this topic we will discuss the origin and evaluation of USSR, date, location, its participants, its factors, its causes, dissolution or collapse of Soviet Union, results and outcomes, and its aftermath. These all things we will discuss in this topic or whole lectures of this topic. So now we have to divide these things into 1, 2 or 3 lectures. Today we are going to discuss first of all evolution in the Russian Revolution of 1917. Revolutionary Bolsheviks overthrew the Russian Caesar and 4 socialist republics were established in 1922. Russia proper joined its far-flung republics to form Union of Socialist Republics. The first leader of this Soviet state was the Marxist revolutionary Vladimir Lenin. Vladimir Lenin is called the first leader of the Soviet states. The Soviet Union was supposed to be a society of true democracy, but in many ways it was no less repressive than the Czarist autocracy that preceded it. It was ruled by a single party, the Communist Party, that demanded the allegiance of every Russian citizen. After 1924, when the dictator Joseph Stalin came to power, the state exercised totalitarian control over the economy, administering all industrial activity and establishing collective farms. It also controlled every aspect of political and social life. People who argued against Stalin's policies were arrested and sent to labor camps known as gulags or executed. After Stalin's death in 1953, Soviet leaders denounced his brutal policies but maintained the Communist Party's power. They focused in particular on the Cold War with Western powers, engaging in a costly and destructive arms races with the United States while exercising military force to suppress anti-communism and extend its hegemony in Eastern Europe. So now we are going to discuss the date and location. 26th December 1991, 28 years ago, and the location is Soviet Union. Participants Its participants were the people of Soviet Union, government of the Soviet Union, governments of the republics of Soviet Union, governments of the autonomous Soviet Socialist Republics of the Soviet Union. Political factor. When Mikhail Gorbachev was named General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union on 11th March 1985, his primary domestic goals were to jump start the moribund Soviet economy and to streamline the cumbersome government bureaucracy. When his initial attempts at reform failed to yield significant results, he instituted the policies of glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring. The former was intended to foster dialogue, while the latter introduced quasi free market policies. To government run industries rather than sparking a renaissance in communist thought. Glasnost opened the floodgates to criticism to the entire Soviet apparatus. The state lost control of both the media and the public. Soviet apparatus, the state lost control of both the media and the public sphere, and democratic reform movements gained steam throughout the Soviet bloc. Perestroika exhibited the roast of the capitalist and communist system. Price controls were lifted in some markets, but existing bureaucratic structure were left in place, meaning the communist officials were able to push back against those policies. They did not benefit them personally. In the end, Gorbachev's reform and his abandonment of the Brezhnev doctrine hastened the demise of the Soviet Empire. By the end of 1989, Hungary had dismantled its border fence with Austria. Solidarity had swept into power in Poland. The Baltic states were taking concerted steps toward independence, and the Berlin Wall had been toppled. The Iron curtain had fallen and the Soviet Union would not long outlast it. The economy, first of all, we discussed the political fact. Now we are going to discuss the economic factor. By some measures, the Soviet economy was the world's second largest in 1990, but shortages of consumer goods were routine and hoarding was commonplace. It was estimated that the Soviet black market economy was the equivalent of more than 10% of the country's official GDP. Economic stagnation had hobbled the country for years, and the perestroika reforms only served to exacerbate the problem. Wage hikes were spotted to printing money, fueling any inflationary spiral. Mismanagement of fiscal policy made the country vulnerable of external factors, and a sharp drop in the price of oil sent the Soviet economy into a tailspin. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, the Soviet Union ranked as one of the world's top producers of energy resources such as oil and natural gas, and exports of those commodities played a vital role in shoring up the world's largest command economy. When oil plunged from $120 a barrel in 1980 to 24 barrel in March 1986, this vital lifeline to external capital dried up. The price of oil temporarily spiked in the wake of Iraq's invasion of Kuwait in August 1990, but by that point the collapse of Soviet Union was well underway. Now we are going to discuss the military factor. It is a widely held belief that Soviet defense spending accelerated dramatically in response to the presidency of Ronald Reagan and proposals such as Strategic Defense Initiative. In fact, the Soviet military budget had been trending upward since at least the early 1970s, but Western analysts were left with best guesses in regard to hard number. Outside estimates of Soviet military spending ranged between 10 and 20% of GDP, and even with the Soviet Union itself, it was difficult to produce an exact accounting because the military budget involved a variety of government ministries, each with its own competing interests. What can be said definitively, however, is that military spending was constantly agnostic of overall economic trends. Even when the Soviet economic lagged, the military remained well funded. In addition, the military took priority when it came to research and development talent, technological innovators, and would be entrepreneurs who could have helped support Gorbachev's partial transition to a market economy where instant flowed into defense industries. The social factor. On 31st July 1990, McDonald's opened its first restaurant in Moscow. The image of the golden arcs in Pushkin Square seems like a trump of Western capitalism, and customers lined up around the block for their first taste of a Big Mac. But such a display was not uncommon in the final years of the Soviet Union. Moscow quit just as long for morning edition of liberal newspaper. Glasnost had indeed ushered in a flurry of new concepts, ideas, and experiences, and Soviet citizens were eager to explore them, whether that involved devouring essays about democratization from leading political philosophers, or dipping a toe into a market economy via Western style fast food. In 1984, Dward had told Gorbachev, everything is rotten, it has to be changed. The feelings was not an uncommon one. The Soviet public was disgusted with the widespread corruption endemic to the Soviet state. Gorbachev's goals with Glasnost and Perestroika was nothing less than a transformation of the Soviet spirit, a new compact between the Soviet regime and its people. Gorbachev's chief advisor, Alexander Vekval, described the challenge facing them. The main issue today is not only economy, this is only the material side of the process. The heart of the matter is in the political system and its relation to man. In the end, the tension between the newly empowered citizenry and the Soviet state, with ruined credibility, proved too much to overcome, and a last gasp attempt by communist hardliners shattered the Soviet Union. Nuclear factor. Throughout the Cold War, the Soviet Union and the United States teetered on the edge of mutual nuclear destruction. What few had concerned, however, was that the Soviet Union would be brought down by an incident involving a civilian nuclear plant. Gorbachev had been in power for just over a year when on April 26, 1986, the Unit 4 reactor at the Chernobyl power station in Pripyat, now in Ukraine, exploded. The explosion and subsequent fires released more than 400 times, and the amount of radioactive fallout as the atomic bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. The official response to the disaster would be a test of Gorbachev's doctrine of openness, and in that regard, Glasnost Glasnost would be found fatally wanting. Communist Party officials acted quickly to suppress information about the severity of the disaster, going as far as to order that May Day parade and celebrations in the affected areas should proceed as planned despite the known risk of radiation exposure. Western reports about the dangerously high levels of wind transported radioactivity were dismissed as gossip, while apparatus quietly collected Geiger counters from science classrooms. Workers were finally able to bring the radiation leak under control on May 4, but Gorbachev did not issue an official statement to the public until May 14, 18 days after the disaster. He characterized the incident at Chernobyl as a misfortune and polarized Western media coverage as a highly immoral campaign of malicious lies. Over time, Communist Party propaganda was increasingly at odds with the daily experiences of those in contamination zone who are dealing with the physical effects of radiation poisoning. Whatever trust remained in the Soviet system had been shattered. Decades later, Gorbachev marked the anniversary of the disaster by stating, even more than my launch of was perhaps the real cause of the collapse of the Soviet Union 5 years later. Thank you. I hope you can understand the factors. If you have any question, you can text or you can ask anytime. Thank you so much, students. Goodbye.